Hey folks, it's Margo with Tri-Spy Tours. We are here at the historic Upper Barn. It was built in the late 19th century by Celia Brewster Strong. And I will take you back to the beginning, I think, today. I first heard about the Culper Spy Ring when I was 7 years old. I used to traipse through the woods of Strong's Neck with a Strong descendant, and we would go to visit Cousin Kate, as she was affectionately known. And we'd go to her 3-story home on the neck. It was called the Cedars, and we'd climb up the crickety old steps, and we'd sit in her room. Cousin Kate was 98 years old when she passed away. She was blind the last 40 years of her life, but she used to write for the now defunct Long Island Forum true tales from the early days on Long Island. And one of the stories she spoke about was Nancy and her magic clothesline. That was her great-great-great-grandmother. Most people referred to Anna Smith Strong, she was a member of the Culper Spy Ring, as Nancy. So Kate told us a story as children of one of her stories that was published in the Long Island Forum called The True Tales from the Early Days on Long Island, and it was about Nancy and her magic clothesline. So you can imagine, as a 7-year-old, hearing about a magic clothesline, the story of the Culper Spy Ring would certainly grab your attention. When I started Tri-Spy Tours in conjunction with the Three Village Historical Society 7 years ago, Barbara M. Russell, the Brookhaven town historian, was quoted as saying in the Times-Beacon Record newspaper, "Lucky is the child who hears the story from an elder and cherishes it for years." So I am that child, and now I'm going to take you a little bit into my childhood and tell you about the Culper Spy Ring and Nancy and her magic clothesline. So as I said earlier, we are live on location. When we would traip through the woods of Strong's Neck, we would stop at this barn here. That's where Cousin Kate and Cousin Sylvia kept their horses, and we'd make our way over to the Cedars from here. So it's certainly a barn that is near and dear to my heart, and it's still owned by the Strong family. Just so you guys know, there should be, the Historical Society obviously is on a lockdown like most of the world. So we're going to be doing these virtual tours until things can get back going again. So we do hope everyone is safe and healthy, and our continued prayers for everyone. There should be a donate now button. So if you like what you hear here and you have $1 to spare, hey, we're a not-for-profit. We'd love to have it. We're also doing specials right now. You get a 15-month membership for the price of a year. So that's $40 memberships begin at. But why don't we go a little bit to what we're here for? So I'm going to show you, these were the books. So we go visit Cousin Kate. And at the holidays, the Long Island Forum was a monthly publication. And every month they would put out a story, and then she'd have all the neighbors over for the holidays, and she'd give out a booklet with all 12-month stories. And you could see a copy here. This was number 43. So that is the True Tales book. And I actually also have a copy of the Long Island Forum. So this is the Long Island Forum. That's actually a sketch of Kate on the cover there. So this is the articles in the publication that she would write for. So I'm going to swing you guys around, and we are going to discuss Nancy and her magic clothesline. So any young kids there, I think you're in for a real treat. So I figured we'll start at the beginning of this Throwback Thursdays with the True Tales from the Early Days on Long Island, with stories from Kate Wheeler Strong. So I'm going to flip you guys around so I can read. Okay, you're going to be looking at the Red Barn, and let's begin our story. Nancy's magic clothesline. It hardly seems possible that quiet Setauket Village should have been known during the stormy days of the Revolution as a hotbed of spies. So much so, in fact, that no person from Setauket could enter New York, then held by the British, without being thoroughly searched. But so it was, for there in the shingled house by the bay dwelt Abraham Woodhull, who with Robert Townsend of Oyster Bay was the head of General Washington's spy system on Long Island. Austin Rowe in the inn in Issaquah, Caleb Brewster with his whaleboat. Those are great rowing boats with which they used to cross the Sound, and many others all helped the cause. Doubtless, there were women among them, but the only one whose story I know was my great-great-grandmother, Anna Smith Strong, a worthy descendant of her great-grandmother, Madam Martha Smith, who sent her out on her own boats after whales. Nancy, as Anna Smith Strong is called in the spy records found by Morton Pennypacker, was married to Judge Silas Strong. Some years later, they came back to the old Smith home on what is now known as Strong's Neck. Properly, it is known as St. George's Manor. The old house was in bad shape, and she must have rejoiced as the Dutch tiles with their blue pictures shone once more and their blue and white around the living room fireplace. And delicious odors came from the kitchen, where a hearth of fieldstones made safe the great fires that burned under pots and kettles. But those were stormy times. News must have gotten from New York, and Austin Rowe, the innkeeper and storekeeper, had to give some reason to be hurried in and out of trips from New York City. And so Nancy found an old count book from Madam Martha, and she made up things that she needed, many things, tablecloths and other expensive items that were ordered in haste. And those trips to the town were back information as well as dry goods. But the information had to cross the Sound, and it was not safe for Caleb Brewster to always land at the same spot. In fact, he had 6 landing places. But how was Abraham Woodhull, to whom Rowe brought the secret messages, to know if Caleb Brewster whaleboat was and where it was hidden? One glance at Madam Nancy's clothesline across the bay would give him his answer. How she knew it was known, but she knew. If Abraham Woodhull saw a black petticoat, most petticoats were red at the time, waving in the wind, he knew that Caleb Brewster was at one of the secret landing spots, and the number of handkerchiefs scattered throughout the wash would indicate what the answer was. And soon they would find it and make a swift passage across the Long Island Sound in Caleb Brewster's whaleboat. Once it got to Connecticut, Caleb Brewster would pass it off to Major Talmadge's Dragoons. He was head of Washington's Secret Service. But there were stormier days ahead. Silas Strong, though not on the list of Washington's spies, evidently had a hand in things, for he was arrested for communication with the enemy and thrown first into the Sugar House prison and later taken to one of the worst and horrible prison hulks, the Jersey, in Brooklyn Harbor. There men died like flies of hunger and disease. It was taking one's life into their own hands to go on board one of those ships, but Madam Nancy was not daunted. Some of her Smith relations were loyal subjects to the king. To them, she went to beg them permission for her to visit her husband. Her petition was eventually granted, and with the boat full of food and other items, she rowed out to the big hulking Jersey ship. Greedy guards dared not steal the food bought by a gracious lady with a British permit. In the family annals, it was recorded that this food saved Silas Strong's life. And later, Madam Nancy was able to secure his release. Even though her husband had to flee to Connecticut for safety, I think she stayed and carried on her part in the culper spying. The Tory relations and some of her older brothers and sisters had no idea what she was doing. In fact, some of her family even regarded her as a Tory. Years have passed, mosses have grown on the old stone in the old family graveyard, and it is only lately that the musty old papers have given up the secret of Nancy's magic clothesline and the important part she played in our country's history. So that's just a little bit about the culper spying. I'm going to flip you guys back over here and let you see me. So just a little bit about Tri-Spy Tours. For you folks who have never been on a tour, Tri-Spy is a play on a triathlon. We do a walking tour version. We do a biking version, and we have partnered with Pominock Tours of Setauket, and we offer a kayak tour. So we're hoping by sometime in June, July, we can get those tours up and running. We really, at the Historical Society, feel that the community is our museum. And we kind of take you around to the places and the people that have made this town so beautiful and so important of what it is today. Most of the tours begin at the original settlement area near the pond in Setauket. That's where the Celticot Indians once lived. They were along the banks of the water there. Celticot, in the Algonquin language they spoke, meant land at the mouth of the creek. So right along the creek there is where they had their wigwams or longhouses. They did not live in teepees. Oldfield, if you're familiar with that area, got its name because it was the old planting fields of the Indians. Strong's Neck, where I am today, was referred to as Minnesaroke, which was the royal residence. So the chief is over here and some other higher ups in the tribe. Speaking of Strong's Neck, it has a very, very interesting story. So as I said, the natives used it as the royal residence. And then when the colonists came, actually we just celebrated our founding day and also Anna Smith Strong's birthday on Tuesday. But on April 14th, 1655, about 7 settlers arrived here from Massachusetts and Southold, and they fell in love with this area. And they negotiated a land deal from the pond in Stony Brook all the way through Setauket, through Port Jefferson, which was known as Drowned Meadow then, all the way to the top of the Belterre Gates. So if you're familiar with that area in Port Jefferson, that was known as Mount Misery, to about as far south as the middle of the island. For various items, 100 needles, some belts of wampum, some iron kettles. An odd item, which was most likely for the chief's son, was a pair of children's stockings. The natives thought they were going to share the land. Obviously, the white man's version prevailed, and Setauket was born. It was briefly known as Ashford. So if you ever drive around Setauket, you might see some buildings called the Ashford Building and streets with that name. They then changed the name to Setauket, being a derivative of Celticot. And there was a lot of squabbling going on about the neck. They called it Ye Little Neck. And now we're going to bring in this fellow by the name of William Tangier Smith. Smith, sound familiar, that name? He was given a land patent for the area here on the north, and he called it St. George's Manor. And then a large piece on the south shore near Mastic and Shirley. That's why Smith's Point, if you're familiar with the ocean, on the south shore of Long Island, that's how it got its name. It was the point of William Tangier Smith's property. The manor house is still there today. It's known as the Manor of St. George. It's actually still owned by the Smith family. During the Revolutionary War, it was known as Fort St. George. And they also were given a piece of property in the middle of the island, which is now owned by the town of Brookhaven. It's the Longwood Estate, and that's where they would keep their livestock. They would summer on the North Shore, and then they would winter on the South Shore. But the Smiths fell on hard times, and they sold this northern section to a fellow by the name of Andrew Seton. Seton was a loyalist, and he had another property in New Jersey. So when the war broke out, he kind of took off. But the problem was he never finished paying the Smiths off. So now we bring in Anna and Selah. They actually met up in Boston and were living in the old Strong homestead in Mount Sinai Belterre area. And they said, why don't you guys go over to the neck to secure the land? Because at this point, all the British were taking over the manor homes, and they didn't want it to fall into the wrong hands. Unfortunately, as Kate mentioned in her story, Selah was arrested. The British did take the manor house, and Anna was forced to live in a cottage with her 6 children. But that just happened to be across the way from Abraham Woodhull's farm. So the whole idea of clothesline and espionage sort of worked out. Let's just mention a little bit about the Culper Spiring if you're not familiar with the members. We have Benjamin Talmadge, child prodigy from Setauket, asked to attend Yale at the age of 12. So the fact that he was asked to attend Yale at the age of 12 meant that he could both read and write Greek and Latin. So that's a feat unto its own. And he quickly moved up the ranks of the Continental Army. He had a very close relationship with Nathan Hale. His brother fought in the Battle of Long Island and perished. But we'll get into Talmadge's story and his connection with Hale and all that at another day. But he had motivation for the cause. He was an ardent patriot, as were they all. And he became part of Washington's inner circle. I always like to joke around and say they had kind of like a bromance, because Talmadge and Washington would do anything for each other. Talmadge wrote his memoirs at the request of his children after the war. And if anybody's into this story, certainly get a copy of that. You can download it on Kindle for a few dollars. But Washington comes to him. Spying was very dangerous. It was a low-life occupation. And he says, I need your help. He says, I want you to find out the movements on Long Island and New York what the British are doing. Talmadge agrees. Again, his best friend just died. He was executed. His brother died in the Battle of Long Island, and the man he adores is asking him to do this. And this is the part I love. So he didn't go to the people he just met in the Continental Army the past year or so. No, he came home to Setauket and called on his band of brothers, and perhaps a sister, and said, I need your help. And that's when he put his little cast of characters together, as I said. He first chose Abraham Woodhull. So anybody out there who watched Turn or is watching it now or wants to watch it, great series by AMC. They depicted Abraham Woodhull perfectly in the first season of the first episode. He was a sickly, timid, scared guy, and then he's having love affairs with Anna Smith Strong and all this other stuff. But Abraham Woodhull headed operations here. Washington said, call yourself the Culpeppers. He says, I don't want to, who's involved? That's the county of the first job I had as a surveyor in Virginia. Talmadge shortens it to Culper, and the Culper Spy Ring is born. As I said, he sets up Woodhull here in Setauket. They go to a fellow by the name of Caleb Brewster. I always picture him in my head as a Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. If he wasn't a spy, he probably would have been a wonderful pirate. Goes to Austin Rowe, innkeeper. He needs someone to get information in New York. And then he goes to our beloved Anna Smith Strong. Selah probably helped a little early on. As I said, Selah was arrested. But Caleb Brewster and Selah Strong were best friends. Not many people know that part. And then they started operating the ring. They realized pretty quickly they can't get too much information in New York. So now we bring in the only non-Setauket person, Robert Townsend. And we'll get into his story at another date as well. Talmadge puts a code together. It's known as Talmadge's Code. People get code names and numbers. Woodhull becomes Samuel Culper Sr. Townsend is Samuel Culper Jr. Washington gets number 711. So it's all very exciting stuff. So those are the cast of characters for the Culper Spy Ring. But today we're just focusing a little bit on the story of my childhood and how I fell in love with the story, hearing them from Cousin Kate, who told them to me when I was 7 years old. And again, that was Anna Smith Strong's great-great-great-granddaughter. So we're going to come to you each Thursday at 2 o'clock for about a half hour, and we're going to read from the True Tales books. So when the Emma S. Clark Library reopens, they have these in the children's section, but I am fortunate enough to have a pile of them from when I was a child. So we're going to get into a lot of fun stories. So gather the kids every Tuesday, 2 o'clock, about a half hour, and we will be telling true tales from the early days on Long Island. And again, there should be a donate now button from the Historical Society. Every little bit can help. We're a not-for-profit. Obviously, we rely on our events to have money come in, and right now everything is certainly on hold, and we do wish you and your families safety and that you're healthy. And shout out certainly to all our first responders and our doctors and nurses and everyone at the grocery stores, everyone who's working through this difficult time. We will get through this together, and in the meantime, I hope you enjoy coming back a little bit in time for at least a half hour of every Thursday to put everything on the shelf and just listen and enjoy. So anyway, I will talk to you guys all soon, and we will see you next Thursday. This weekend, weather permitting, I might be heading out to the Oldfield Lighthouse. We might head down to the town of Brookhaven Beach on Shore Road, talk about our kayak tours, a little bit about the shipbuilding here in Setauket. So let's see what the next few days brings. But every Thursday, 2 o'clock, Throwback Thursday, True Tales of the Early Days on Long Island from Kate Wheeler Strong's Long Island Forum Stories. Thank you all, and thank you for joining us, and we'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.